Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be seeing what's making the headlines with the Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika and the co-owner of Westmonster.com, Michael Heaver. So good evening to both of you.
Evening.
Hello. So let's take a look then at what's on the front pages. And the Financial Times leads with our main story this evening, President Trump's decision to withdraw the US from the Iran nuclear deal. And he's pictured there holding up an agreement to reinstate sanctions. When I make promises, I keep them, a quotation from Donald Trump on the front of the Daily Telegraph. And the US president's description of the deal as rotten is the take from the Times. The Eye pictures the Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, who called America's withdrawal unacceptable. The Metro's front page features a warning from Barack Obama, who said Mr. Trump's decision risks another war in the Middle East. The Guardian features a similar warning of a crisis for the wider Gulf region. Away from the Iran deal, the Lords take a wrecking ball to Brexit. That's the headline on the Daily Express, after a number of defeats for the government this evening in the House of Lords. And the Daily Star leads with a story about Rio Ferdinand's baby. So, lots of stories there to talk about with Ayesha Hazarika and Michael Heaver, but there's one main one which really dominates the front pages, and that is Donald Trump's decision tonight, just a few hours ago, to pull out of the Iran nuclear agreement. You've picked out the Daily Telegraph first of all, and their headline is what he said tonight: when I make promises, I keep them.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is something, I mean, all eyes have really been on this story since sort of yesterday when he tweeted that he was going to make a decision on this soon, and apparently even caught some White House staffers unawares, not for the first time. This is a huge, huge issue. Donald Trump's talked about this Iran deal for a long, long time. He talked about it a lot during his presidential campaign. He had a real issue with it. And to be fair to him, he did say in his election campaign, I'm going to rip up this deal. And that's what it looks like he's going to do. And it's interesting, the international community have come out and widely condemned it. Macron, Merkel, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, everybody was personally putting the pressure on Donald Trump to try and convince him to stay in
Boris
this deal.
Johnson travelled to Washington
to
try to
Indeed, and we saw the bromance between Macron and Trump. Obviously, Macron having his state visit not that long ago, but they couldn't convince Donald Trump to do what they wanted to. So the ramifications for this are going to be huge. There's going to be political consequences in the region. There's going to be financial consequences, because if the sanctions inhibit Iran producing oil, then that will have an effect on oil prices. They could go up. There's already a deficit in the oil market. So huge ramifications. And of course, Obama coming out and saying, actually, this could really destabilise the peace process in the Middle East.
So this decision does throw up so many different questions, doesn't it? And it's so many different angles to it. What do you think President Trump's calculation was here, aside from fulfilling his campaign promises?
Well, look, I think I got deja vu today because it sort of reminded me of everything that went with North Korea. I remember Trump talking about fire and fury and Little Rocket Man. You know, of course, he was condemned from pillar to post. And you saw those amazing scenes, of course, with Kim Jong-un and South Korean president. And it just reminds me of, you know, Trump is using, in diplomatic terms, a big stick. This is what he said. I'm not going to stand for this deal. Very interesting now to have a US president who promises, delivers and wins. That's what we're seeing in diplomatic terms. I believe you'll see the same again here. I was just looking, actually. I mean, Con Cotlin on the front of the Telegraph, very interesting piece entitled Why Tehran's Aggression Buried This Deal. I mean, the Islamic Republic has been increasingly aggressive. It's stockpiling masses of weapons in Lebanon, in Syria. I actually looked as well. The majority of Americans were actually wanted Congress to reject Barack Obama the deal that he did with Iran. So this isn't a deal that ever had popular support in America. It isn't a deal that Trump ever said he was going to support. And it's you know, with him as US president now, you've got Mike Pompeo heading over to North Korea as a Secretary of State. I think Trump diplomacy, we've seen with North Korea, if it's applied to Iran, will deliver.
What do you make of that line of thinking that Donald Trump thinks, well, I've threatened sanctions with North Korea, I've talked about military might, it seems to have brought Kim Jong-un to the table, I'll try it again with Iran. Do you think that's what he's hoping will work here?
That may well be guiding his logic. I feel, though, the thing that's guiding it more is a sort of rabid desire to rip up everything that his predecessor did, Barack Obama, this seemed to jump out to Trump, along with Obamacare, which was giving affordable health care to lots of people in America, as two very egregious legacy points that he wanted to rip up. So I think he's kind of using this to, he's got this kind of weird vendetta against everything that Obama did. I mean, look, on the North Korea thing, he may well think strategically, look, I've kind of, rattled the saber, I've helped catalyse them coming to the table. But remember, we haven't even seen the deal on North Korea, and I remain quite sceptical. Let's see what actually happens on that. Let's see what they are prepared to give up. But I think everybody rightly will be worried about the implications for this, because the geopolitics go much wider than him wanting to rip up his thing with Obama. Remember, Iran is very close to China and to Russia, and there's going to be lots of kind of consequences of this.
OK, and let's take a look at the front page of The Times as well, which you want to look at as well. Trump ditches rotten nuclear deal with Iran, his word rotten there. And it says, dismay amongst allies as sanctions are reimposed. So, Michael, what do you make of what this means for relations between his closest allies who've been urging him not to go ahead with this? It's possible that the sanctions that he imposes could include penalising any countries or companies that continue to trade with Iran. So that could mean that even though his allies are saying they want to continue pursuing this deal, Iran says it wants to try and make it work, it might mean that the deal could fall apart, couldn't it?
I mean, look, Donald Trump is not about following the pack, OK? This is a president who came to office...
But does he not need allies?
Well, no, because he's delivering. I mean, don't forget, I'll go back to the comparison. Everyone was condemning him from pillar to post about the Kim Jong-un North Korean situation. Everyone was saying this is going to make the world more dangerous and it would possibly see war and all the rest of it, and it didn't. It delivered. And what it showed is if you deal with these regimes in these harsh ways and you get rid of these ridiculous deals and you stand up to them, it does deliver results. I was quite interested, actually, to see President Macron tweeting straight away on behalf of the UK and Germany. He's increasingly trying to sort of position himself as sort of the spokesman of Europe. So I thought that was an interesting sort of subplot to all of this. But look, I think Trump is a leader that takes people with him. And I think it may take a while for countries to see his strategy play out, but I think it was one that will deliver in the same way as we're seeing developments in North Korea. And you can say, look, we don't know where that's going, but fair enough. But who would have thought a short time ago that we would ever, in our lifetimes, have seen the sort of developments we've seen on the Korean Peninsula? Unthinkable not that long ago. I think the same thing will play out with Iran. I think you'll see developments, and I think ultimately they will realise they have to deal with Donald Trump.
Let's take a look at the front page of the Metro, because they actually raise some of the warnings that President Obama has put forward. You mentioned, didn't you, Ayesha, that one of the motivations could well be Trump's desire to rip up everything that he agreed. Decision risks putting US on road to war, warns Obama. And some people will argue that Iran is a different kettle of fish to North Korea, and that the hardliners in Iran have been against this deal, and it would potentially play into their hands. It's a complicated situation.
Yeah, that's exactly one of the arguments. One of the arguments is that it will strengthen the arm of the hardliners who never liked this deal, and they sort of said to the moderates who are more in charge in Iran now, well, actually, we shouldn't have done this deal. You know, America is the enemy. We should never, ever, ever do a deal with them. So they're very kind of hard line. So there's a real worry that they could use this to depose the more moderate regime, and the more extremist regime in Iran will probably not be great for the general stability of the region. Iran and Israel are constantly at loggerheads. It's interesting, the sort of Israeli intervention in this as well, because Benjamin Netanyahu said, you know, I don't believe the Iranians. I think they are lying about the fact that about their nuclear weapons. And of course, Trump has just made the decision controversially to decree Jerusalem the sort of Israeli capital now, and that's going to be, you know, that's already another controversial decision. So Israel is sort of the only country really to have come out and welcomed it. So look, who knows how this is going to play out? As Michael said, we don't know, but certainly there's going to be a lot of instability. And also, I think what's very interesting to note about Trump is how he is really enjoying his role on the world stage at the moment. You know, he's very much enjoying, you know, reaching out to Macron. And you're absolutely right about Macron. It's very interesting that Macron was the first European leader that got a state visit. And that's because Macron knows that Theresa May is very weak and he knows Merkel is very weak. So he is propelling himself to be the go-to guy for Trump in Europe. However, all the hand-holding, all the kissy-kissy, all the bromance did not persuade Donald Trump to think again on Iran.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone can persuade Donald Trump to do something that he doesn't want to do. And I think the fact is, the Barack Obama, they can say what they like. The fact is, in my opinion, when you look at things like North Korea and Iran, they basically they kicked the can down the road. They did these flimsy deals that were a rip-off. They sort of ignored the nuclear sort of upping of the tempo in North Korea in terms of their development of nuclear arms. And Donald Trump is someone, whether you like him or you don't like him, he is going to take issues head-on. If he doesn't like the deal, he isn't going to be persuaded. No one can tell him otherwise. That, to me, is leadership.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see how it all plans out. I mean, the other argument is it's a big distraction from what's going on in the United States, which is, for example, a lot of gun issues, lots of, other problems that he's not tackling.
OK, he's seeking more positive headlines, you think, potentially? He's only getting lots of headlines here anyway. We're going to take a pause now, though, and we're going to look at some of the other stories in the papers, including, if you're watching this with a glass of wine in your hand, fried wine. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching The Press Preview. With me tonight, Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika and the co-owner of Westmonster.com, Michael Heaver. Lots going on this evening because while we had Donald Trump's announcement, we also had lots going on in the House of Lords. The Daily Express has led with that story. 4 defeats for the government over the EU withdrawal bill delivered by the House of Lords.
I mean, it's obscene what's going on at the House of Lords at the minute. I mean, day after day, week after week, we see Europhile lords in the unelected chamber voting for things basically to overrule Brexit. That everything from the EEA to the Customs Union, Charter of Fundamental Rights, EU agencies, they even voted today to remove the Brexit date from the EU withdrawal bill completely. And you've got to remember what the House of Lords is. It's stuffed to the rafters with cronies. There's nearly 100 Lib Dems in there, don't forget. They're not even polling 10% in that party. And this, to me, is a bigger story beyond Brexit because it's about a crisis in democracy. And when I speak to people and I see people on social media, just fed up with democracy, fed up with politicians, the feeling that when they go and vote, they're basically ignored, and in this case, actively overruled. And to me, it sums up everything that's wrong. We need to completely abolish the unelected House of Lords. And I don't know why the government haven't been more aggressive on this, because if I was them, I'd be expelling them. By the way, there are Conservative Lords voting for this stuff as well. They should be kicking them out of the party and they should flood the place with pro-Brexit Lords. This is completely out of kilter with public opinion and it's bang out of order.
Well, I say hooray for the Lords and absolutely good on them. They are completely doing the job that they're to do, which is to scrutinise what comes up from the Commons. And I'm just really glad that there are some sensible people in the Lords that are taking a kind of a smart look at what is happening with Brexit. And the whole strapline of the Brexit campaign was take back control and we must make our parliament work properly. And that's exactly what's happening. Brexit's going to be the biggest decision this country has faced since the Second World War, and I think it should have every bit of scrutiny that it can get. So I say good on the Lords tonight.
But this is why people don't vote, because you've unelected people basically say, well, we know we voted to end open borders, we know you voted that the UK can do trade deals, we don't care, we're going to overrule you. So why then people turn around and say, well, why should I go and vote then?
The House of Commons can overrule what the Lords decide.
But these Lords are showing they don't give a damn what people voted for. They're overruling. As I say, this isn't 1 or 2 votes. I think it's about 12 or 13 defeats now for the government on this. Everything, as I said, they don't even want there to be a date of, Brexit date in the EU withdrawal bill. It's absolutely scandalous, and it shows you by every vote they show, they make the strong case for why we shouldn't have an unelected House of Lords. Scrap it.
Well, Michael says about how terrible and egregious it is having the Lib Dems in the Lords when they're only polling 10%.
Well, 100 of them.
Well, UKIP are hardly polling anything.
UKIP haven't had a single Lord appointed ever.
And because
you're
nowhere right now
100.
politically. I mean, the local elections showed that.
UKIP won a national election and has had no peers ever appointed. The Lib Dems have got 100.
How many MPs have you got? How many?
What do you mean, how many MPs have we got?
How many
No. UKIP won a national election as an anti-EU party and didn't get a single Lord. The Lib Dems have got 100. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's fair?
I think it's absolutely fair that
they've got Lib Dems have got 100 Lib Dems.
They haven't got UKIP are
I'm
nowhere
talking about
right
UKIP.
now.
I'm talking about 100 Lib Dems that are now voting
UKIP
to
are
overrule the
nowhere,
British
Michael.
public.
UKIP
Why are you
are
talking about
nowhere.
UKIP? I'm talking about
Because
100
you're a
Lib
big
Dems
part of
who are
UKIP.
overruling... No, I'm not. That's wrong.
So I think
100
the Lords
Lib
are doing,
Dems overruling the British people. It's disgusting.
The Lords are there to do a job, and that's what they're doing.
Disgusting.
OK, I'm going to move on to talk about wine.
I think we need some now.
OK, we're going to move into page 6 of The Sun. Fright Wine is their headline there, and it's kind of basically saying there's good news and bad news when it comes to drinking wine health-wise.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's one of these stories, isn't it? You see them all the time about you shouldn't eat that and you shouldn't drink that. But, you know, there it is. Glass of white wine ups male cancer risk by 26%. But the good news, a glass of red cuts prostate risk by 12%. I don't know about anyone else, but when I see these, it's very hard to keep up to date. You see, you know, things about red meat and all sorts of things in terms of dietary requirements. We're all going to die at the end of the day. I think you should enjoy your life. Don't worry too much about it. Indulge, but don't go over the top, and you should be all right.
Do you think that's right? I mean, is it helpful to have statistics like this? Anyone drinking a glass of wine while watching might find it unsettling, but...
I think Michael's right. I think there's so much confusing evidence. Now, definitely alcohol, you know, is not brilliant for your health.
A glass of wine while watching might find it unsettling, but...
I think Michael's right. I think there's so much confusing evidence. Now, definitely alcohol, you know, is not brilliant for your health in huge amounts. But I think people do get confused with what are the right limits. And actually, everything in moderation is okay. But there's so many things, you know, people are very worried about sugar right now. People are worried about too much carbohydrate. People are worried about, you know, people get very mixed messages. It's almost like all this nutritional advice needs to sort of start from ground zero again. And we just need to get clear, understandable guidance because it is very confusing. It makes me want to have a bottle of white wine.